Hi boys and girls, it is time for social studies. We're still learning about our colonial towns and townspeople. Yesterday we learned about bread makers and the millers who would grind the wheat to make the flour. And today we're going to learn about cloth makers, spinners, and weavers because they needed cloth. We need cloth to make clothes and blankets and things that we sew. So let's read about how they made their cloth to make their clothes and things. Several hundred years ago, farmers made their own cloth from materials they gathered from their farms. Most farmers sheared wool from sheep that they raised on their farms. On a few farms where cotton was grown, farmers picked cotton from cotton plants that grew in their fields. The farmers' wives cleaned, combed, dyed, and spun this cotton or wool into thread before weaving it into cloth. But this took a lot of time. So if they had several garments to make, garments are pieces of clothing, like your shirt is a garment, your pants are a garment, they could give their cotton or wool to tradespeople who made the cloth for them. Today we will learn about spinners and weavers, two types of tradespeople in town who had tools that helped them make more cloth than at one time a farmer and his family could make by themselves. And this is a picture of what they used to weave the cloth together, a loom. Many farmers used the wool of the sheep to make cloth. Once a sheep's coat was thick, farmers would shave or shear off the wool with a sharp blade, and the wool grew back and the sheep were ready to be sheared again the following spring. And we learned about this when we learned about our farms and we learned about sheep. And remember, we learned that it doesn't hurt the sheep at all. They just grow all that wool, and then when it's time for a haircut, the farmers can shear it off, they can shave it off, and then they have their wool to make cloth. Let's take a close look at cotton, a plant grown on farms in the southern colonies along the coast. The cotton first had to be planted, then it had to be picked from the plant. A cotton ball is a seed pod of the cotton plant. Farmers plucked the white, string-like cotton fibers found inside the cotton boll, not the cotton ball, like we get cotton balls in a bag at the store. They look almost the same, but these are called a cotton boll. It has an O in it instead of an A for ball. And the stalk of another plant called flax that could be picked apart into fibers that could be made into a cloth called linen. Whether cotton or flax, farmers needed to clean the fibers to remove the seeds and dirt from these plant parts before making them into cloth. Because you wouldn't want to have dirt and leaves and stuff weaved into your cloth to make clothes. That would be itchy and dirty. So the first step in making cloth is to make the cotton, flax, or wool into thread. In this picture, there are some tools that a farmer had at home to help him do this. After the cotton, flax, or wool was cleaned, it had to be combed with a tool called a cardor. As you can see from this picture, hand carders, not carter with a T, but cardor with a D. They look similar to a cat or a dog brush. Women would use 2 carders at a time to brush the wool until all the fibers lined up in the same direction. So they would have to brush it like brushing hair. Once the fiber was combed, the women might dye the cotton or wool different colors using the juice from different plants or berries. Sometimes we dye our clothes when we spill, don't we? But we don't do it on purpose. So they would dip the cotton or wool into the dye, allowing it to soak up the colorful juices. Dyeing was hard work and took a long time, so farmers usually skipped this step if they were making cloth at home. That's one reason why the clothing sewn at home from cloth made on the farm in those days was so plain. It was usually just a whitish beige color, and it was a rare treat to buy colorful cloth in town. Next, women making their own clothes at home used small wooden spindles. I have to turn my page. Here we go. They would use small wooden spindles, like this one to twist the clean fibers into thread. Women turned the spindle by hand to make yarn that was much stronger than the single fiber of cotton, flax, or wool. If a farmer could afford it, he would buy a spinning wheel like this one for his wife. The spinning wheel allowed a woman to turn cotton, flax, or wool into yarn or thread by twisting them together very tightly. A spinning wheel could spin wool into thread much more quickly than a hand spindle. In rare cases when a farmer was very wealthy or lived near a large town, he would buy thread from a spinner, a tradesperson who turned cotton, flax, or wool into thread using a spinning wheel. The spinning wheel not only has a spindle attached to it, but it also, so there's the spindle, and then there's a big wheel right here, and then a foot pedal down here called a treadle. And the spinner would step on the treadle to make the big wheel spin, which was called treadling. See how the thread between the woman's left hand and the spindle has been spun into thread and is ready to be collected on the spindle. So you can see the fuzzy wool or cotton, and then she's spinning it, and there it's on the spool. Let's see, I have to find my place. A large spinning wheel turned the spindle around quickly, allowing the spinner to make a lot of thread or yarn in one day. One way the farmers and their family could save time was to buy yarn or thread from the spinner and then weave this thread into the cloth by hand at home. Or, if they wanted to save even more time and effort, they could visit another tradesperson, the weaver, to make cloth for them. After the spinner made the yarn or the thread, the weaver took over. The weaver's job was to weave yarn or thread into cloth. If you look at the clothing you are wearing right now, you'll see that the cloth is actually made up of lots of little rows of threads, just like in this picture. So if you held your shirt up to the sun a little bit and even kind of pulled it a little bit, you could see all the little weaving. Some of these rows go up and down and others go across. To do this, the weavers used a tool called a loom. A typical loom had pedals that the weaver used to control the machine's parts. The weaver used a special piece called a shuttle to carry the strings back and forth from one side of the loom to the other. The newly made cloth was rolled up on a bolt underneath the loom. Today, cloth is made in factories. Having a hard time turning our pages today. Today, cloth is made in factories by machines, but these machines spin and weave just like the tradespeople did a long time ago. So now you know how cotton, flax, and wool were woven into cloth by hand years ago, both at home and by the spinners and weavers in town. Okay, boys and girls, I hope you got all that. That was a lot of information. But that's how they made material. That's how they made cloth into clothes a long time ago. Okay, boys and girls, we are all done for today. Have a great day, and make sure you watch Miss Baird's Read Aloud next.